Let's remove ourselves from the planet. Let's get towards the moon, because there's been more news from the Artemis II crew mission, which is captivating millions of people watching live concurrently on the NASA website as well, and listening to their conversations, which happen hour by hour. They're also updating their tweets and social media. And we're watching this play out. They've described the sublime views, the rarely seen far side of the moon, which has happened in the past few hours, and the comparatively ridiculous, too, this persistent problem with the onboard toilet. And the live feed I mentioned on the NASA website picked up this conversation a short while ago. This is ground control and the crew just a few hours ago.
And Integrity Houston, breaking news. We have results on the discussions down here for the tank venting, and at this time, you are go for all types of uses of the toilet.
And the crew rejoices. Thank you.
Understood, Jackie. That is an obviously large moon looking out the window. Good gracious. And you can definitely see the beginnings of the far side with Oriental and beyond Oriental a little bit. That is just awesome.
Let's move ourselves to Toulouse. Let's bring in Olivier Sanguy, the editor-in-chief of Space News. Welcome to France 24 tonight, Olivier. It is making, I think, the journey even more watchable, isn't it? This sublime to ridiculous elements. This mission is fraught with risk, such rewards, such beauty, and dealing with something we all know about: plumbing, the problems in the bathroom.
Well, the toilets have always been a problem in space, and in the International Space Station, they had some problems with the toilets also. It's more complicated because in space, you don't have gravity to pull the things down, if you see. You need a ventilator, quite a complex system. So that's why sometimes they have some problems with the toilets. And do not forget that Artemis II is a test flight. That's NASA says it's a test flight.
And also, bear this in mind as well, because when we're looking at the Orion shuttle complex in itself, I'm told that they are in something that's sizable comparatively would be a camper van. And this hasn't really changed much over decades as well. It might be 50 years or so, but this is still a comparatively small space. When we see them together, as we will in a moment, all four of them, from that perhaps wide angle, it looks bigger than it is. But this is basically boxing and coxing around and bumping into each other, and even sleeping upside down.
Yes, well, sleeping upside down is not a problem because you are in 0G. So you can sleep the head down. It's not down. You are in 0G, so no problem for that. True that the space is small because going to the moon is quite ask for a lot of power. So the bigger the spacecraft is, the most power you need. So it's a trade-off if you want. They have enough space to live comfortably for 10 days. They are trained for that. And, is going well, in fact, as we see, and tomorrow they will surpass the Apollo 13 record for the distance from Earth. So for the moment, this test flight is going very, very well.
I think we heard the commander read in the last few hours. One thing that interests me, you just touched upon it. When you're upside down, it's not a problem. But I think that in terms of where you are, the astronaut's saying that whether they're right side up, upside down, after a while it's hard to tell, to the degree where Commander Reid was saying, can you just tell me, is that the North Pole of the moon or the South Pole? I can't work it out. And I guess it's trying to work out and orientating yourself when you're not sure which way is right side up.
Yes, true. It's something we explain to our visitors at the Cité de l'Espace, that in space you can have disorientation. That's true. But I think that if Commander Reid Wiseman had a map of the moon at the time, he will figure out what the north is and the south is. However, in the Orion spacecraft, there are still some ups and downs. For example, when they are seated, the panels, the instrumentation panel is quite classical. I mean, it's written from left to right, and there is up and down in the graphics you see.
Tell me about something else, which is they've all got this instrument to exercise so that the muscles don't slowly diminish with a lack of gravity. It's like a rowing instrument. But just to explain to those watching, when you're doing this with the force, it's affecting the whole of the shuttle at the same time. I heard the ground crew saying that even the solar panels, they were flexing, they were moving on the outside because of the rowing on the inside.
Yes, because we are in 0G. That means that a little force can move a lot of mass compared to Earth because of the gravity. In the International Space Station, it is always known the instruments for exercise are isolated from the International Space Station to avoid interferences with experiments. Here in Orion, visibly, there is no need for that, but I'm not surprised that it happened. And you know, an astronaut in a mission must do 2 hours of physical exercise, the loss of mass, of muscle mass and bone mass also. So perhaps for a 10-day mission like this, they do not need 2 hours, but they still need to do this exercise. This is very important.
Tell us about the language, because those who are just captivated by this, just watching the astronauts saying they're seeing the far side of the moon for the first time, as you said, they are set to break a record, which will be the longest journey of any humans into space when they carry out this flight past. Sometime tomorrow it will happen. At some point, I think they lose contact, don't they? There's a slightly anxious moment for about 51 minutes or so where they lose contact with ground control. But tell us about, this is not the first time they've seen the far side of the moon. It's happened once before, hasn't it?
Yes, almost on all Apollo missions, and before by robotic probes. So the first side of the moon is the side you don't see from Earth, because the moon is rotating at the same time it is rotating around the Earth. And it is locked, it is a gravity lock. So we always see the same side. Of course, I will go further behind the moon, in a sense. That has happened with Apollo missions, and they will have this loss of contact because while the spacecraft is behind the moon, radio waves can't pass the moon. That's why there is this loss of contact for 40 minutes, 45 minutes around this. And this is classical, but it's always an anxious moment, as you said.
Let's have a listen to, this is Christina Koch, and she's talking about the moon's surfaces, seeing incredible detail. And I'd like just to talk us through in layman's terms some of the things she's talking about on the surface. Let's just take a listen.
One of the neat things that I'm seeing right now is in the sort of largest mare field, the one that sort of makes up most of the very western side of what you can see on the near side. There is a giant, it's much more obvious now that one of those mares is a huge basin, because it's just right now it's kind of at the 1 o'clock position. And I don't know the name of that big one. It's basically just west of where Serientatis and Tranquillitatis are, but it is phenomenal.
Break it down for us. What is she talking? The mares, the detail, that'll be clear to you. What's she seeing there?
But mares, of course, are not water. What we call mare on the moon are lava that have been on the ground and have solidified, and it has the aspect of it seems from Earth and from orbit at a certain age. It seems very flat, but it's not so flat. That's why before, in the ancient times, we called that mare, because we were thinking from Earth, it's water, but of course it's not water. In fact, it is lava solidified. The moon is full of craters. Also, we see that in this picture. It's full of craters. These are simply asteroids that smash on the moon, and they do it more frequently than Earth because there is no atmosphere to protect the moon. And the moon is also a stepping stone to understand the history of the solar system just by studying impact craters. That's why missions to the moon are important, and also studying the moon is studying the Earth, because the moon is a part of the Earth that have been smashed out during a big collision. So when you are studying the moon, you are studying the very old Earth.
Tell us about the challenge that they have when it comes to space junk, Olivier. Am I right to say there's more than 14,000 satellites in the solar system? There's also, I think, 3,000 defunct satellites in space as well, plus, well, I think 1.2 million. I think that's the quote of smaller bits of what you might classify as space junk. They've had to map out a route. They haven't got radar on board, but they've had to work out basically a clear line of trajectory. When we think about the kind of the deep black space, it's not as clear as that, is there? There needs to be a path. Is that right?
The path around space junk, as you say, and it is really space junk that you can have, is essentially low Earth orbit. Understand, something like few hundred kilometers around the Earth. That is where they are almost all of space junk. So there are radars on the ground that map all these debris and they find the path. So it's done now. They are more near the moon than the Earth. There is no debris out there. Perhaps small debris from asteroids, but the Orion capsule is shielded. So that's not a problem for the moment. After the loss of contact, the return to the Earth, the next big challenge will be re-entry. The capsule will re-enter the atmosphere of the Earth at 40,000 kilometers, and there is a thermal shield. This is the next dynamic phase of this mission, and it will be April 10, April 11 for us.
Very interesting. Now, before we know that President Trump has been instrumental in getting this mission off its feet since he came into power the first time round. But before we have, a kind of US moment of absolute success in a speech once, and if hopefully, fingers crossed, they land and everything goes tickety-boo, it is worth saying, isn't it, this could not take place without European space technology. Talk us through that.
Yes, you are absolutely right to put that. There is a service module attached to the Orion capsule, and it is European. It is done by the European Space Agency with industry, for example, Airbus or Thales Alenia Space. And today, the Americans cannot go to the moon and go back to Earth without Europe, because the service module it's like the engine of the spacecraft. You cannot do it without that. So it's a cooperation mission also.
The other thing that's worth saying, with this trajectory, we're hearing speeds. I think the speeds vary, but at one point when they set off kind of the injection, the lunar injection we all seem to know about, and most people are experts on all of a sudden, was it travelling at something like 24,000 miles per hour? I think that varies now. It may be a bit less than that now. But things can affect the trajectory as well. It's worth explaining. They have a challenge up the onboard to try to offset carbon dioxide, and with it, is there a slight risk that kind of moves their trajectory in another course?
Well, the one who is commanding the spacecraft right now is essentially Newton laws. I mean, they had a propulsion phase, as you said, translunar ejection with a big speed jump to get out of the gravity well of Earth. Now they are quite slower. They are 103,000 kilometers because they are going up this gravity well of the Earth. And then tomorrow, I think, or 2 days later, they will enter the gravity well of the moon. And then they will go out like this. And what they are doing right now are just only trajectory correction maneuvers, no more. And they have even canceled 2 trajectory correction maneuvers because the translunar injection was so well done with the European module that they didn't need that. So it's Newton who is the commander of the spacecraft for the trajectory right now, and this is quite well known.
And this beautiful image, we're looking at this. These are images of the Earth taken in 1972 on the last mission, the Apollo mission. And if we can have a look at those again, this is the Earth shots from this time round. But it is worth saying, when you look at when it was taken this time round, the sun is behind the Earth. What we're seeing, the light, that's entirely from the moon.
Exactly, and it is a stunning picture who show all the progress of camera. To speak a bit of technical, the ISO, the setting of sensibility of the camera was something like 57,000 ISO. When you take a picture on the ground, you use 100 ISO, for example. So it shows how the camera have progressed since Apollo 17, for example.
Take us to the south side of the moon, the South Pole, the lunar pole. And when we go on to future journeys, when the establishment of a base there, not just for the American ambitions, Chinese ambitions, perhaps Russian ambitions as well, they all want to plant a sustained flag there. It is the water that's the goal. Is that right? For sustained life, for future missions, perhaps to Mars?
Yes, water is important because the logic of future of space is what is called ESRU, ESRU, in situ resource utilization, is to use the resources we have there. For example, when you go on vacation with your car, you take the fuel where you have to go back. In space, we have everything from the beginning to the end of the mission. The new logic will be in the far future, not for the very first mission, would be, for example, to use resources on the moon. For example, if you have water ice, water is something you can drink, A lot of studies before astronauts drink water, ice from the moon, of course. But water is also hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen you can breathe. Hydrogen and oxygen is a rocket fuel. So maybe in the future, we will harvest what is on the destination to be able to go back. There is a scenario to go to Mars, for example, is going to Mars without the fuel for the return trip. The fuel will be done on Mars with the atmosphere of Mars, for example. Of course, it will be a robotic plant that will do it before we send the humans to Mars.
For those used to Love Island or I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, this is kind of almost the perfect reality TV show for you. Must be watching the NASA feed. Just give us an insight, essential guide to understanding actually what you get out of these conversations. What is it you think actually that's so fascinating about this particular journey?
It's fascinating because at the same time, if you listen closely to the conversation between the ground and the capsule, it's quite mundane. These are technical exchanges. Are your ventilators on? Is the technical point number 300 is okay? Okay, and then at some moment, like what you with Christina Kush, we listen. You have this human touch, the human side of human expressions. It is how I look the moon as a human. And scientists are waiting some observation by human eyes because they can see some nuance of colors. They are waiting that about the moon. No big discoveries, of course, but a sort of human feeling of what it is and maybe some hint of things we may have missed with robotic probes.
The final thought, Olivier, we're seeing so many firsts here, aren't we? The first African-American in space, first female flying so far in space, the same for a Canadian astronaut as well. There will be firsts once this mission is established. I think we're talking about a time frame for both goals for Washington and Beijing is within 10 years to have a more sustained base there. There'll be another first at some point. I put this to our World This Week panel on Friday, which was presumably they'll be looking for a world's first moon correspondent. Would you be interested?
Yes, why not? But, in the coming years, we will have first and first and first. We will have, of course, the first non-Americans on the moon. Surely the Chinese, but after it was really signed, it was under Biden that was done. You will have a Japanese astronaut on the moon. One day there will be a European astronaut on the moon, and maybe Indian astronaut on the moon. India have a space program. They want to have crewed spacecraft. They want to have a station around the Earth, India, and later they said they want to have Indian astronauts on the moon by themselves.
Brilliant to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much, Olivier. Great to have a really detailed chat and an understanding about what's going on. Olivier Sanguy, Editor-in-Chief of Space News in Toulouse. Thank you.